Hello everyone, thank you for joining me for another video on the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about some of my favourite recent 4K releases. So I have a stack of 4K UHDs to talk about today to recommend to you, and also this shows the breadth of what is being released on the 4K format. We've come a long way in just the past few years, and I think this selection displays that. Some of these discs are from different regions, but being 4K, you can play them no matter where you are in the world. So hopefully this is valuable to everyone watching. So let's just get straight into it. And the first one I have is this, Brian De Palma's Blowout, getting a 4K disc from the Criterion Collection in the UK. This has already been released in the US by Criterion about 2 years ago, but I never managed to get the import of it. So I was glad to see it finally come round here, and it's exceptional. The film is brilliant, but I mean the 4K presentation is a huge upgrade over the older disc which just magically appeared. This is the Arrow Video Blu-ray that I have. This is from about 10 years ago, and it was starting to show its age. I may still keep this Arrow one around just because it has a few special features that aren't on Criterion's edition, but for the most part this is now the definitive release of this film. If you know nothing about the film, it stars John Travolta, who is a sound recordist for movies. He is recording some sounds in nature, and as he is recording, he witnesses an accident where someone dies, and on listening back, he thinks that this is actually an assassination attempt on a politician. In American cinema during the 70s and 80s, there was a huge wave of these films about paranoia and political assassination. And it turns out that even though technology has advanced since this time, this is still so relevant to today. And it just makes for such engaging, thrilling watching. So Blowout on 4K from Criterion is well worth the upgrade, and it is finally coming to the UK. The next film I want to talk about is Civil War. This is Alex Garland's latest film, perhaps his last film, because he said he wants to step away from directing now after this film. Civil War was released earlier this year. I missed it at the cinema, so I was so glad to finally experience it at home on this 4K disc. And to be honest, I'd heard a lot of mixed things about this film. Some people said they loved it, some people said they found it incredibly boring. So the story is set, as you can imagine, in a state of civil war in the US. So there are multiple factions vying for control of the country. And this is of course a fictional premise, but one that many people would say is perhaps a bit too close to reality than they would like. So the group of journalists that we follow in the film are trying to get to the White House to interview the president. And they are on a clock because the Western forces are approaching the White House with the intention to kill the president. So there is this constant sense of drama and conflict and racing against time, and it's very much a heart of darkness story. It's these people venturing into the unknown to get to a certain place to meet their objective, and they don't even really know what they're going to find at the end. This isn't set on battlefields, although there is some action in the film, particularly towards the end. So I expect many cinema goers bought tickets to this film expecting to see an actual civil war play out and watch various battles on battlefields and urban warfare, and for the whole thing to essentially be a film version of a Call of Duty game, which it is not. What I took away from the film is that it is about the images of war and the nature of not really video but photography being such an important player in these kind of scenarios. And not to make it too topical, but we've even seen in very big world events that have happened in just the last few days that the nature of images are so important in terms of telling a story and getting a message across to the people. Whether the message is good or bad, that's beside the point. But it's also saying at what cost do we go to attain these images. So this film gave me a lot to think about, and I don't think I have fully gotten everything from it, but I don't think it's as bad as some people are saying it to be. It also doesn't strike me as a masterpiece or anything yet, but I will be for sure revisiting this one in the future. Now it helps that the 4K disc actually looks incredible, and for a new film release I couldn't imagine wanting anything else from this disc. It looks so clear, the audio is brilliant to me, So overall, this is a great disc, and like I said, a very interesting film that I will be revisiting. Next up, I have the brand new 4K release from Second Sight Films. It is Kim Ji-woon's A Bittersweet Life. This is the 2005 film, which was very important in putting South Korean film on the map for Western audiences. The film stars Lee Byung-hun as this quiet gangster figure who is tough as nails. You don't want to mess with him, and he is hired by his boss to stalk the boss's mistress because the boss thinks that the mistress is seeing other men, and Lee's character is told to kill both the mistress and any man that she's with if this is the case. But if only it was that simple, and there are lots of complications along the way. I'll leave it at that, but this is an incredible film, very thrilling. There's some good action in this film, and in fact the film kind of transcends genres because we have a gangster film here. It goes a bit western at one point. There's a romance here. There's lots of stuff going on. So for me, this is one of the most important films from Korean cinema at the time. And 20 years on, it remains incredible. Just last week, I talked about Le Samurai from Jean-Pierre Melville because that just got a 4K release. And this film directly is inspired by Alain Delon's work with Jean-Pierre Melville. Kim Ji-woon says that in some of the special features on this release when the film was shown at Cannes Film Festival. And you can even see that Lee Byung-hun looks a lot like Alain Delon, both facially but also in how he carries himself in this film. So it's perfect casting. And the 4K restoration presented here by Second Sight, which I believe was overseen by Kim Ji-woon from the original camera negative source, it looks beautiful. And it looks much better than previous presentations where there have of course been limitations in the technology in terms of resolution, but also there have been colour issues in the past which seemingly have been resolved here. So this is great news for fans of the film. As you would expect from Second Sight, it comes in the rigid hard box. You get the film inside, you get a book, and you get the art cards as well. So as with all of their limited editions, there's lots to dig into. Especially on disc, there's multiple commentaries and interviews. There's a great making of documentary. There's stuff about when the film was shown at Cannes Film Festival. So it really is a definitive package for this film, and I think fans will enjoy it a lot. I certainly did. I may as well stick with a theme for now. Important films from South Korean cinema in the early 2000s. I have this one, Memories of Murder. This is Bong Joon-ho's film, which I think really put him on the map, and many people today will say this is his best film, even though he has seen incredible success with Parasite, most notably. This is the recent release from Curzon here in the UK, and there's a lot of good things to say about this release, but I mainly want to compare this to a previous edition of the film that I have, which has now magically appeared, Criterion Collection's edition of the film from 2021. This was just a standard Blu-ray, not a 4K release. Now, before I go into what I think about the release and comparing it to this one, let me just give you a bit of a primer on the film. So this is a thriller set in a rural community where people are being murdered. These women are being murdered, and there is a mission to find the murderer, but the local police are having trouble with this, so a city policeman is drafted in to work with the community, and of course there are differences in approach to how they do an investigation. So of course you have the central conflict of the police trying to capture the murderer, but then within the police team there are differences in how to do things, so there's conflict there as well. And of course, through Bong Joon-ho's brilliant direction, all of this material is elevated, as well as the great performances in the film as well, don't get me wrong. The film has such a great sense of pace, great sense of style as well, and that is why it has endured today and is quite rightly seen as one of the greatest thrillers ever made. So if you've not experienced this yet, I strongly recommend it. And if you're not a fan of Korean cinema or watching foreign films, I would say make an exception for Memories of Murder, particularly if you like any of the films of David Fincher, for example. If you like Seven, then this kind of film is right up your street. So about the 4K presentation, well, the film looks very good indeed. There is a lot of detail in the image, perhaps not as much as you might expect, and I'm not too sure why. There are certain parts of this film that just don't look as sharp as you might expect from a 4K restoration of the original camera negative. Much of the story is told in flashback, so the film has quite a desaturated look for a lot of it. That is intentional, that is the artistic choice of the film, and this impacts how the film is perceived. Memories of Murder is not a film that is going to hit you over the head with vivid, vibrant colours, but colour has been a particularly controversial topic surrounding this film when the Criterion disc came out, because this is sourced from a 4K restoration overseen by the filmmakers, and the film had a very different appearance to how it had been seen previously. The film had a completely different colour grade to previous editions on Blu-ray and DVD, and people saying it didn't look like this on theatrical projections and prints that they had from the time. This, of course, is a big conversation in film preservation and restoration. Not one to go into here again, but if it's the decision of the filmmakers to have the film look like this, then fair enough. That's how this release looks. But it did look overly teal and green, and I thought it wasn't the best presentation of the film, in my opinion. Many people would agree with me. I'm sure many would disagree as well. There's plenty of screenshot comparisons online if you want to go and check those out. I don't have them to hand, but you can certainly see a difference between this and previous versions of the film. So then we come to the 4K presentation on the Curzon disc, which looks different again. Now this is very interesting because this is from a 4K scan that was used on a Korean 4K Blu-ray earlier this year, or perhaps last year. And in that Korean version, as well as in this version, they have toned down those colour changes to the grade that were present in the Criterion. So it doesn't quite look as teal or as green. And I think that is an improvement personally. But it's interesting because if this is director approved, does that mean these new 4K versions are not director approved? Which one is the better one? Which one is the intended version of the film? Well, frankly, it gets very complicated and muddy. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to personal preference as to which one you choose. Clearly, the Criterion version is more in line with what the filmmakers think the film should look like. However, the Curzon version and the Korean 4K disc are more in line with how the film would have previously been seen. On top of that, it's worth noting that the Curzon version does not have any HDR grade. There is no high dynamic range. So really what you're getting here is you're getting the colour change that is different to the Criterion version and the uptick in resolution, but there is no HDR processing. In terms of detail, it's quite close because the 4K restoration used on the Criterion disc does pack in a lot of detail. While I don't like the colour grade choices here, I thought the film looked very good on the Criterion Blu-ray. That's purely in terms of detail. And there is an upgrade here with the Curzon disc, but I think to many people it might not be that noticeable. And with a lack of HDR grade on the Curzon disc, I think it's going to come down to which colour grade do you like better. In terms of special features, there's some crossover here. They both have the same commentary with Bong Joon-ho and the cast and crew, and they have the deleted scenes with commentary as well. The Criterion one has the Tony Raines commentary, which is not present here, and on the Curzon there is a behind the scenes featurette and the White Man short film. Inside the case you get the discs presented in this digipack, so you got the Blu-ray and the 4K disc. You also get a booklet. It's a very, very thin booklet with 2 pieces of writing which are great from Jake Cunningham and Michael Leader, but the writing is less than 10 pages long, so there's not a very lengthy read in here. And as well as that, you get 3 different posters here, which I'm not going to be able to unravel and show you here. You can have a look at them online, but you get the new artwork for the release, but you also get some of the original film promotional material on these posters. So that's what you get in this release. And I'll just say something very quickly on the packaging, and I've already shared my opinions on this with Coen directly. But the packaging, I would kind of want something a bit more for a big release like this. I mean, just compare it to what Second Sight did with A Bittersweet Life. You know, here you have a rigid, hard case. It feels substantial. It's not going to get damaged easily. There are no ratings logos or anything on this because they use a J card with it. And I've already got minor damage to this. You won't be able to see it on the camera, but there's already dents and dings on this. So this one probably will not stand the test of time like this would. So with Memories of Murder on 4K from Curzon, I definitely prefer the presentation on this compared to Criterion's, although I think there are still some areas that this could be improved. Whether we get any other version of this film in the future, I don't know. So for now, this is my one that I'll be watching. Then we come to something very exciting, Alejandro Jodorowsky's Santa Sangre. This is a 4K special edition coming from Severin Films, who have just recently started releasing again in the UK. And this one is an exact copy of the one they previously released in the US a few years ago. The story is quite a crazy one, so I'll try and explain. We follow this young man who is part of this circus troupe, who has this complicated relationship with some of the other members who are part of his family. His mother is part of this strange religious group, and his father is this kind of tyrant, womanizing guy who is very powerful and not really a very good father figure. We see the boy's childhood until this horrific act occurs that splits up the whole circus group, and then we see him as an adult who is dealing with what has happened to his family, and from there it turns into an allegorical horror revenge story with lots of blood and violence and strange things going on. The film really is one of a kind, and it has a spirit throughout it that feels a bit Fellini, a bit Buñuel, has that Terry Gilliam style to it. Honestly, it's mad, and I love it. And it looks beautiful on the 4K restoration here, which has been overseen by the director himself. And Severin have done a great job, because before this I had an older Blu-ray from Mr. Bongo, who don't make Blu-rays anymore, and for years I watched it on that. Now this is a huge upgrade and it really does look beautiful. This is a tremendous 4K presentation. This is a hefty set. It's a 4-disc set where you get the 4K disc with the film and some of the special features like the audio commentary. You get exactly the same on the Blu-ray disc. There is another Blu-ray disc with tons of special features, and I mean tons. I'm not going to read them all out, but there is so much on the additional Blu-ray, so definitely have a look at what you get here, but there's a lot. And then there's a 4th disc, which is the soundtrack CD, and the film has some incredible music within it. So in terms of the content on disc and the presentation of the film, I couldn't have wished for anything better. I think the only area where this release falls down is again in the packaging. It doesn't feel as premium as what some other labels would do. This is not in a hard box packaging, so it is the softer cardboard, which does damage more easily, especially on the corners. And there are the ratings logos on practically every face of the product. So it's unnecessary. You only have to put 2 ratings logos on every release, and as long as one is on the biggest face of the release, you don't have to have it on the spine as well. So I think that's just something that some people don't realize. So just a few issues with the packaging, but everything else here on the discs I absolutely loved. Next I have Love Lies Bleeding. This is the rose glass film which came out earlier this year, at least in the UK, and I missed it at the cinema, so again very happy to see it on disc. A24 have been doing some great things with their 4K releases and their packaging. This one is no different. I love how this one looks. The story here is probably one I'm not going to be able to sell very well to you, but it is well worth seeking out. We follow Kristen Stewart's character. She works at this local gym. She ends up meeting one of the new members of the gym who, she's like a bodybuilder. She is absolutely huge. I mean, she is massive. And they end up striking a relationship together, but they realize they're caught up in something that is a bit more nefarious, and the families involved here are a bit sinister. Ed Harris plays a great character who, I mean, Ed Harris is scary anyway, but he's great at playing this character. And the film has an overall brilliant neo-noir styling. The visual aesthetics really fit the story, really create a sense of mood and atmosphere. And the film goes to some very strange places, particularly towards the end, things that not in a million years would I expect would happen. And yeah, I was seeing things that I just wasn't ready for. So it's a great film, great presentation on the 4K, and as far as I know, there is no 4K disc in the UK as of yet. So if you want the 4K, you have to get the A24 edition. Then I have Monkey Man. This is Dev Patel's directorial debut. Another one I missed at the cinema earlier this year. I've just not been very good at catching new releases, but luckily this has had a 4K release, which is not a given nowadays. You know, there are many films that do not get 4K releases when it is possible. So I'm just thankful when they do happen. Dev Patel also stars in the film as well as directing it. He plays a character who has had a very difficult childhood, living in poverty, just being in awful situations. He's living quite a meager adult life, just fighting in underground fight clubs. But then he finds a way to move up the ranks in society and seek revenge from some people that have done him and his family wrong. I had a great time with this one, I really did, and I really hope that Dev Patel now gets more opportunities to make further films and that this isn't just a one-off, because I really enjoyed it. And there's some great directorial flourishes here that really show that Dev Patel has a keen interest in cinema, and the film just has a real raw power to it, you know, a real sense of urgency, has a style to it as well. And I think everything just works here in tandem, and I can't wait to see more. I can't wait to see what he does next. Another 4K that I got from the US is The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. This is the latest film from Guy Ritchie, starring Henry Cavill and a whole host of other great actors, in this action film set during World War II about this group of renegades who come together to take down the Nazis. Honestly, do you need much more than that? I don't, but I'm also quite a fan of Guy Ritchie's filmography, and I'll watch anything that he's made, quite frankly. The film is just a lot of fun. There's a lot of great action. Henry Cavill is great. A lot of the other players are great as well. And there's some really brutal sequences, particularly one where the gang go to take out this Nazi outpost where one of their guys is being held captive, so they need to go and free him so they can go and do the larger mission. And that whole sequence felt like playing a Far Cry game, which if you're into video games, you'll know what I mean. And I was just there for it. It was great. I don't think the film is going to reinvent your idea of what cinema is, but if you like these kind of action films, then this is absolutely one to check out. And the 4K presentation was great as well. Some of the sequences get very dark, and I mean visually dark, because they're set at night. So it's in those sequences where you actually see what the 4K disc can do, because if this was on a standard Blu-ray, I'm not sure you would be able to see anything at all. So it's one for the action fans, the Guy Ritchie fans, but I had a great time with it. And then we come to Bernardo Bertolucci's The Dreamers from the early 2000s. This was his film that was very much a tribute to the French New Wave, particularly Jean-Luc Godard and Bande à Part, because you see direct references to this in this film where the central characters actually try to recreate some of that film in Paris. The story is set during the 1968 student riots in Paris, so it's quite a culturally important time. And again, the French New Wave cinema is very important to that time and that political movement as well. And this film from Bertolucci has this spirit of freedom and revolution. And we follow this American who ends up staying with this brother and sister who have quite an intimate relationship with one another. and we see how these three kind of come together. The Dreamers is not a film that will be for everyone, and I think this is going to be for people that know what they're getting into with a Bernardo Bertolucci movie. But if this film is for you, the 4K disc looks very good, in my opinion. I saw some people saying that there might be some framing issues with the presentation here. I didn't notice any of that, but some people are saying that, you know, how the film is framed has been changed during the 4K restoration. So it's worth looking into that if this film is something that you're very passionate about. I don't know the film too well enough to comment on any of that. I had a great time watching it though. It's a bit of a weird film in parts, so it's not my favourite film, but I really do admire Bertolucci and what he's done for cinema. So to have his film on 4K, this was a huge surprise to me because it never even got a Blu-ray release in the UK. So yeah, one that I wanted for my collection. So that's my stack of recent 4K films that I've been watching. I hope you enjoyed me talking a bit about them. Hopefully you can take at least one of these as a recommendation for a film to go and watch and hopefully enjoy. Honestly, my work here is done. If anyone ever discovers a new film that they like based off my recommendation, that's all I want here. So hopefully one of these is something for you to check out and enjoy, hopefully love too. I'll include purchasing links for some of these down in the description, so if you use those, it helps support the channel and no additional cost to you. So I really do thank you if you do that. If you'd like more recommendations from me, just click the video that's presented on screen right now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.